Hello. Alright, so I'm just gonna record this video for any of you that need help on this particular assignment. Okay, but anyway, so I'm just gonna go over this. So here you may have remembered right before quarter three ended, I gave you the generic formula for an exponential function. Now this generic formula does not consider the horizontal or vertical shift. It is the most basic formula, and it just consists of the vertical stretch, which is the number multiplied on the outside, and the common ratio, which is on the inside. This idea of the common ratio basically comes from what we learned in geometric series in module 12. Okay, but if we're just considering this generic, just the most basic formula without any horizontal shifts or vertical shifts, it's just going to be the most, we'll just keep it as simple as possible. Okay, so what we want to do is, given the following table, we want to write an exponential function. Okay, so if you look at this table here, if you look at this table, you want to try to look for a common ratio between each of the numbers. So if I want to consider the common ratio, if you can kind of look at it, each of these numbers are going to be multiplied by 3. So in other words, our common ratio, b, is going to be equal to 3. If you guys have trouble seeing that pattern, you can always do a quick calculation. Just take the 2 points that are right next to each other and just take the second y value and divide it by the first. So 6 divided by 2 is going to be equal to 3. Now, what I showed in my notes, here, is you can multiply each number by 3. If you guys like to draw arrows, you guys can draw arrows. And then that's one way to represent the common ratio. Okay, so next what we need to do is we need to consider an xy value. So if I want to consider just any xy value, I'm just going to choose the first one. So I'm just going to choose x comma y, and that's going to be 0, 0 comma 2. Okay, so next what we need to do is we need to, in order to create this, the generic formula for this, we need to plug in some values. Okay, so we know our common ratio is 3. So 3 gets plugged in. Oh gosh, what's happening? Okay, 3 gets plugged in here. Okay, x is 0. This means 0 gets plugged in there. Our output y is the same thing as f of x. The same thing as f of x. 2 gets plugged in there. Okay. So our goal is we need to solve for a. So if we want to solve for a, what we need to do is, you guys remember, anything to the 0 power is going to be 1. Okay, anything to the 0 power is 1. So another way that we can represent this, a times 1 is a. So this means a is going to equal 2. Okay. Next, what we need to do is we need to create this basic exponential function. So to create this basic exponential function, we just plug in a and b. So a is 2, and then b is going to be 3. And this right here, this represents our exponential function for this table. Okay. All right. So the next one. Okay. So if we're let's say we're given this. So if we're given this now, this is given the following table. We want to write an exponential function. So same idea. We need to solve for b. So in order to find what b is, look for a multiplication or division pattern within the table. If you guys realize this, each term is divided by 2, or in other words, multiplied by 1/2. So one way you could do it, if you guys don't know how to do that quick calculation, just take the second term and divide it by the first. So 8 divided by 16, and that equals 1/2. Okay, so next what we need to do is we need to choose any xy value. So I'm just going to choose any xy value in the table to make things easier. I'm just going to choose this first one. So this first one is 1 comma 16. So again, what this 1/2 means is that each of these numbers here are going to be multiplied by 1/2. Okay? Okay, so next what we need to do is we need to go and plug in things what we know in order to solve for a. So we know that b is going to be 1/2. So I'm just going to put that in here. So that is going to be 1/2. And we have x here. X is 1, so this gets plugged in right here. 16 is what gets plugged in for our output. 16 goes right there. Okay, so if you wanted to solve this here, so anything 1/2 raised to the first power, it's a 16 equals a, and we're raising that to the 1/2, right? Okay, so I'm hoping you guys know how to do this. I know some of you still struggle with this, but if you multiply both sides of the equation by 2, that's how we get 32 equals a. Okay, so now we have our values for a and b, and what we can do is we can determine exponential function. So a is 32. 32 gets plugged in right here. B is 1/2. So it's because b is 1/2. This part in here is going to be 1/2. So 1/2. And this is what represents our exponential function. Okay. All right. There's one more that I want to go over, and then I'll finish up this video. Okay. So it says, given the following table, we want to write an exponential function. So what we want to do is same idea. So the same idea here, we need to consider a common ratio between each of these terms. Some of you might have a hard time doing that. So what I suggested doing is you can just take the second number and divide it by the first. So 6 divided by 9. 6 divided by 9 is the same thing as 2/3. Okay. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just choose any xy value. I'm just going to choose the easiest one I see right here. Easiest one I see right here. So x comma y is going to be 2 comma 9. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is we need to consider our generic equation for an exponential function. So we know that this part here, b, is going to be 2/3. 2/3 gets what's plugged in right here. So that's going to be 2/3. And then x is 2. So 2 gets plugged in here. Y, our output, is going to be 9. Okay? So next what we need to do is we need to go ahead and solve for a. So if you guys remember, 2/3 times 2/3 is going to be 4/9, right? So 2 times 2, the numerator is going to be 4. And the denominator, for the denominator, if you do 3 times 3, 3 times 3 is going to be 9. Okay? So next what we need to do is we need to multiply both sides by 9. If we multiply both sides by 9, we get 81 equals a times 4. Or in other words, it's the same thing as 4a. Next, what we need to do is, in order to solve for a, we divide by 4. So, dividing by 4, we're going to get a equals 20.25. Okay? Last step, what we need to do is we need to create our equation for the exponential function. So, in order to create our equation for the exponential function, so a is 20.25. That's given right here. B is 2/3. So B is 2/3. And that is basically our answer. So 2/3. And boom. That's it. Okay. So I'll leave that last one as an exercise. So if you need help on that, you guys can just ask me if you have any questions. Last thing I wanted to mention was that, so this last example that we went over, each y value is multiplied by 2/3. Okay, that's our common ratio. Let me know if you have any questions, and that is